Oh, fantastic. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate everybody joining us today. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I'm in Raleigh for the North Carolina Chamber Infrastructure and Transportation Summit. But welcome, everybody. Has everybody had a chance to look over the agenda? If so, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Maggie. I'd make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you,
Ann
Maggie.
Coletta,
Do I have
Ann
a second?
Coletta, I second. Ann Coletta, I second.
Thank you, Ann. And I don't know who's taking call, but whoever's taking call today.
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Asheville, Maggie Allman.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Parker Sloan.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Bob Davy.
Aye.
David County, Kevin Inslee.
Aye.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley. Aye. Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Gaunt.
Aye.
And Weaverville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. Is there anybody online that I missed?
Besides myself, I'll say aye.
Oh, sorry, Anthony.
Yeah, this is David White. I think I've been appointed as the rural transit rep, so I'm here.
Thanks, David. And yes, David, you are the rural transit rep.
That's a good segue. I see a couple of new faces and names on the board. I'd like to welcome new members, David White and Maggie from the city of Asheville. Next, I'll read the ethics statement. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved. Does anyone have any conflicts? Hearing none. Do we have any public comment?
We do have one public comment. Ash Lounsbury from Asheville.
That's exciting. We do allow for 3 minutes for public comment. So
If you'd like to stand up front, or where you are, wherever you are.
Perfect.
okay.
Thanks. I'm Ash Lounsbury from the city of Asheville. I'm an eco-psychologist living on South French Broad Avenue, and I wish to submit a comment regarding the 2020 to 2029 Transportation Improvement Program. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I have been a frequent visitor of Choctaw Street Park and the historic Black community of Southside, where I sit on the banks of Nasty Branch. This has been a great source of healing for me as I learn to connect to the larger Earth community that surrounds us all. I often visit the park and specifically the banks of Nasty Branch to move through intense loneliness and feelings of purposelessness. While there, I admire the other beings that inhabit the area. Several times, the red-shouldered hawk swoops joyfully around and perches a few feet from me. Other times, small songbirds such as phoebes stare down. Raccoons busy washing up in the water. Chickadees, eastern bluebirds, goldfinches, sparrows, and crows all dance in the canopy together. I've watched red-bellied woodpeckers make homes out of the dead trees, groundhogs feast after the long winter's nap. And I also noticed tracks in the wet banks. A huge bear paw one day, another deer hooves. When snow covers the surrounding park, a warren's worth of rabbit tracks punctuate the drifts. I am here today to express my concern about the proposed paving of specific sections of the Nasty Branch Greenway, referred to in the 2020 to 2029 Transportation Improvement Program, page 22, table 1, as Town Branch. I am concerned with the paving of Choctaw Street Park, the land that borders Choctaw Street, and the subsequent introduction of a bioswale needed to prevent polluted runoff once these areas are paved. These current plans mean reducing Nasty Branch's riparian buffer, disrupting and endangering countless species. As I mentioned before, the buffer is home to several animals: hawks, raccoons, woodpeckers, mallards, a variety of songbirds, deer, rabbits, hummingbirds, pollinators of all varieties, and native plant species: alders, black walnut, jewelweed, sycamores, wild raspberry, a great host of others. A small trail through the buffer leads to the water where many animal tracks can be found, as the animals use Nasty Branch as a water source. The buffer also provides as part of the creek protection from erosion and polluted runoff. I urge the developers to consider the potential impact of pavement on the surrounding ecosystem of this area and ideally explore using the pre-existing sidewalks that run the length of Choctaw Street to route the greenway to the River Arts District. These existing sidewalks are wide and they include crosswalks already equipped with ADA compliant warning pads. Using the pre-existing sidewalks would eliminate the risk of ecosystem disruption. Paving will significantly impact the delicate balance of ecosystems and the habitats of animals and plants in the area. By considering alternative options, we can preserve the natural beauty of this community while still providing safe and accessible paths for pedestrians. I urge you to prioritize the protection of our urban green spaces and consider more minimal paving options for the planned Nasty Branch Greenway. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was very well timed. You were right at 3 minutes. Well rehearsed. Thank you. Next, we'll go to the consent agenda. I'll need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
I think that was Jennifer first, and I didn't catch you second, but we'll do
Shannon,
roll call.
second.
Thank you.
Asheville, Kimroni.
Aye.
Asheville, Maggie Ullman.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Parker Sloan.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Bob Davy.
Aye.
Fayette County, Kevin Inslee.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lastly.
Aye.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley. Aye. Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Gaunt.
Aye.
Rural Transit, David White.
Aye.
Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
And Weaverville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. The ayes have it.
Fantastic. Now we'll move to item 4 business, number A, which is modification of 5310 programming. And I'm trusting this is Tristan.
I'll actually hand it off to Scott on our team for the next 2 items.
Okay.
This is Scott, French Broad River NPO, one of the transportation planners, primarily working in the area of transit funding. And this is really I'll say not an accounting error, but it was a realization on my part after the January board meeting that the allocation of 5310 funding to the city of Asheville, and very shortly 5310 is enhanced mobility for seniors and people with disabilities. It's an FTA funding program. The city of Asheville had originally made a $210,000 request to fund their paratransit service that's, of course, operated in partnership with Buncombe County. Shortly after the January board meeting, I realized that funding amount was only 52% of 5310 funds, and FTA rules required that a minimum of 55% of total funds be allocated to traditional projects. So this motion here before you today is really just a clarification and a correction on that funding amount. So the funding amount is proposed to go from $210,000 to $223,471,000, just about a $13,000 increase to the city of Asheville. And that resulting amount results in $17,550 remaining in the fund, which is proposed to be allocated to the city of Asheville for administrative costs. That comes to 3% of the total funds. In previous years, about 10% of the funds have been allocated to the city of Asheville for administrative costs, but due to many requests this past year and an agreement amongst all the recipients, the city has agreed to a 3% amount this year. So TCC's recommendation was to recognize the increased amount needed to meet the 55% rule for FDA purposes and to allocate the remainder at 3% to the City of Asheville for administrative costs. And with that, I'd be glad to take any questions or comments on that.
Are there any questions? I would like to thank the City of Asheville for taking a 3% instead of the 10%. Thank you so much. That allows us to help other funds. Any additional comments?
We're a team.
I'm sorry.
That was Maggie just saying, we're a team. We have to, looking at it
Yeah.
at the scale as this group, we can achieve more when we row in the same direction.
Yes, I appreciate that. So hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Kim, so moved.
Thank you, Kim. Do I hear a second?
Second here.
Catherine seconded in the room.
Perfect. And time for a roll call.
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Asheville, Maggie Ullman.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Parker Sloan.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Bob Davy.
Aye.
Greenwood County, Kevin Ensley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lapsley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley. Aye. Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Gaunt.
Aye.
Rural Transit, David White.
Aye.
Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
And Weaverville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. Yeah, I've had it.
Fantastic. Moving on to the next item.
This is Scott Adams again from the French Broad River NPO. So this is a proposed modification to JARC programming. JARC is an acronym that stands for Jobs Access Reverse Commute. This is a 10% allocation of 5307 funds. 5307 is the Urbanized Area Transit Grant Program. That's the primary FTA funding mechanism for both Asheville Rights Transit and also Buncombe County Mountain Mobility. The 10% set aside for JARC purposes has been a local policy decision the last several years, and in this funding round, the City of Asheville was the only applicant for these funds, and their initial application was to fund the bus route 170, which runs between downtown Asheville and the southern edge of downtown Black Mountain. And the initial request was for $254,270 to fund that service. That was approved by the board at their January meeting, and since then, because there have been no other applications for these funds, the city has submitted a revised application for the remainder of the funds at $153,674 to supplement funding for ART's bus route S3 that stands for South 3. This is the bus route that runs between the WNC Ag Center immediately adjacent to Asheville Regional Airport, which is also served by this line, and back north to the transit center in downtown Asheville. So this request is to allocate the remainder of JARC funding to the City of Asheville, specifically to this bus route. This was approved by TCC at their previous meeting, so the proposed action is to consider the approval of the additional funding request. And with that, glad to take any questions or comments on that.
Was anybody else told that their money was left over so that they could apply for it?
Yes, I mean, that's, basically when we, file all this, it's, stated there are remaining funds within that. So, basically re-advertised it and did not receive any additional applications.
Okay.
Fantastic. Any other questions or comments?
I think just one thing with to further up on Scott's point, one of the groups that was followed up on was the Recovery to Career group. They are starting a band pool program in concert with the Land Sky CDM program. They declined to request additional funds. They were awarded it last year for DART funds, but they have not gotten the agreements from the city to move forward as of yet. So they said they did not need additional funds this time.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Tristan. Any other comments? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
This is Kim, so moved.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim.
I can second again.
We have a set.
Catherine seconded in the room.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Hey, roll call.
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Asheville, Maggie Ullman.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Parker Sloan.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Bob Daisy.
Aye.
Haywood County, Kevin Ensley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lapsley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley. Aye. Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Dawn.
Aye.
Rural Transit, David White.
Aye.
Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
And Weaverville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. The ayes have it.
Thank you. Great that they're getting the additional funds. Moving on to item C, the PM2 and PM3 performance targets.
Okay, so y'all may recall earlier in the year, we adopted performance safety targets for highway safety. That involved like number of fatalities on roads, fatality rate, serious injuries, bike ped crashes. So if you scroll to the next page in your packet, you can see a little bit lower. Highlighted in red is what we need to adopt performance measures for this month. So PM2 is pavement and bridge condition, and PM3 is system reliability and freight reliability. CMAQ measures only apply to the Charlotte urbanized area. But these measures are federally required for us to adopt every year, I believe. And the MPO has two options. So DOT released recommended targets, and those are statewide targets, and we can choose to adopt those, or we can establish unique targets that are only applicable to our planning area. So the MPO's and TCC's recommendation for that would be to adopt these statewide targets, much like we did with the highway safety performance measures earlier this year. Making our own targets for the planning area would require a lot more work on the MPO and MPO staff. We'd have to take on responsibility of monitoring those metrics and likely hire someone else on staff to do so. And essentially, it'd be a lot more work on staff without increasing our influence on any of the projects in the region. So we wouldn't see any more funding for construction or influence to add additional projects to the TIP or anything like that. So these targets that you see on the screen right now were recommended by DOT. They're statewide and they're fairly conservative. If you scroll up, you can see a couple little tables and infographics on why the numbers are the way they are. But yeah, and this is an action item, so we are looking for approval of performance targets. And yeah, I'll take any questions.
So who can tell us,
tell us the definition of poor? And what happens when it is poor?
Sure, DOT, do you have an answer for how you guys come up with the poor versus good pavement condition rating?
How we come up with the pavement condition rating? So,
I mean, you know, pavement is a pothole, but a bridge that's rated poor, that's a concern. I mean, I'm just curious.
yeah, so pavement condition, is not just potholes.
I get it, but I mean, I'm not gonna die if I hit a pothole probably, but.
Right. So the bridge program in general is completely different, separate from our other funding sources. And they're evaluated every, 2 years? Yeah, so every 2 years, thorough evaluation of both their structural deficiencies as well as the functional deficiencies. So, yeah, as far as the actual score though, it's below 80% is when it starts, it gets into the program, and certainly anything lower than that gets higher priorities.
So does below 80% equal poor? Is that what I'm
I
hearing?
think it's actually below 60%. I can check into that to find the actual.
Well, I just wondered. Yes, okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
And can we get clarification as well? I don't think by setting these goals, are we held accountable for them?
In terms of accountability, I mean, it's something that requires follow-up every 2 years, as Logan mentioned. It's something that we're required to put into our planning documents for consideration. So that's really where the accountability is. But I will point out that in the packet, the bullet points provided from NCDOT, one that I point out every time we go through this is that projects and funding levels in this DIP are unlikely to significantly change performance over the next 2 to 4 years. I think that is one of the heaviest bullet points there is. I think that says a lot about the current funding levels in transportation, but it also kind of says a lot about kind of the relay loop or the feedback loop in this, and that we still aren't at a point where the performance targets are informing investment decisions, and that's something we're continuing to advocate for at the state level. Does that get to your question, Anthony?
Sure does. Because looking at the comparisons, there's some that are increasing by 2%, like the interstate pavement condition, which I think we'll be able to meet that with the improvements to 26. But I wanted to make sure we were setting goals that we can actually achieve.
Yeah, I think something we discussed at the TCC is that I think the philosophy with some of these targets is a little bit different than the safety targets. If you all remember some of the safety targets we discussed, one of the things that was clearly pointed out is that to achieve some of those targets, we would need to reverse some of the safety trends we're seeing and do so dramatically and quickly. So, I mean, I think the aspiration of setting targets like that is very noble. I mean, I don't think there's anyone who doesn't want to see crashes and serious crashes getting reduced. I would say the philosophy with these targets, from what I can tell, is it is more achievable. I think some of these are even getting a little conservative, percent of national highway system bridges in good condition going down. I think that is just a realistic, sobering yet achievable target that's being set. So just to point out, there is a little bit of a different philosophy being used in the setting of these specific targets.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments?
This is Daniel Sellers. Tristan, you just said about there being a different philosophy with target setting. Do you know which branch of DOT is setting this particular set of targets? And I assume it's different than the safety targets. Or are these all coming out of one particular performance metrics group?
I believe they're, if I'm not mistaken, they're centrally coordinated through the planning division. I know that a lot of the other divisions at NCDOT play a large role in it, but I think if I'm not mistaken, planning is who has held kind of staff level forums in the past about these.
Does that answer your question, Daniel?
It is an interesting answer to the question, yes.
Yes. Any other questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Jen.
Jennifer first. Jen first.
The second was from Shannon in the room.
Perfect. Thank you. Roll call.
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Asheville, Maggie Ullman.
Aye.
DOT Division 14, Chuck McGrady.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Parker Sloan.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Bob Daisy.
Aye.
Haywood County, Kevin Ensley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lapsley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley. Aye. Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Gaunt.
Aye.
Rural Transit, David White.
Aye.
Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
And Weaverville, Catherine Cordell. The ayes have it.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we'll move along to the one I'm most interested in, which is the amendment for the 2029 TIP.
Okay, so we have a lot of amendments this month, but they largely include shifting of funding and scheduling in several locally administered projects. Of note, changes to the Acosta Trail, Black Mountain Riverwalk Greenway, Woodfin Greenway, and Bent Creek Greenway projects. There are also 3 locally administered project additions to the TIP, and that is the Riceville Road Sideway Improvement Project, Phase 2 of the Acosta Trail Project, and the Montreat Texas Road Pedestrian Bridge Project. Beyond locally administered projects, the bridge replacement project over 9th Street and Black Mountain is delaying construction from FY23 to FY24 to allow additional time for right-of-way acquisition. And the Rush Avenue upgrade project is also delaying construction from FY23 to 24 to allow additional time for planning and design. Beyond that, there's a few kind of miscellaneous highway safety changes and projects, and I believe that's it. And yeah, this is an action item as well, so we are looking for a consideration of approval of these amendments.
Kim, you have your hand raised?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious. This is Kim Roney from City of Asheville. I'm curious when we have public comment, which is rare and much appreciated, that points to concerns around approval processes for infrastructure like greenways. What are the levers or procedures in place for doing that community outreach so that the community understands some of the concerns and can look at mitigating or maybe even pulling some of those resourceful suggestions?
Sure. I mean, I think that we don't necessarily have any mechanisms in place of how to directly address that, but we can go by the board's guidance. I mean, I think that we can request, this is a City of Asheville managed project, we can request that city staff provide a presentation at a later meeting, potentially next month, to go over some of the steps that they're looking at to consider the environmental impacts of the project, or potentially we can direct some of that more directly between the interested parties. So I think those are the main things that come to mind.
Thank you for that and for adding to my understanding. I would certainly be glad to see what that would look like for this suggestion that we had a comment around, and to be included on communications, just so that I can better understand the processes and follow up. And also, when I look at the entire published tip, I know that they're different than the STIP. But when I follow the links through, this is included in the Transportation Improvement Program parallel to the STIP. Can you help me understand where they're connected and where they are not connected?
Sure. So think of the TIP and STIP as what is it from Ghostbusters? The gatekeeper and the keymaster. There are two parts, both trying to unlock the same thing, which is federal funding and federal approvals. So the TIP and STIP are generally required to be in lockstep with each other to make sure that the federal approval process is going smoothly and that funding can move from the federal government to whatever parties are administering that funding. With that said, there is kind of a lot there. I mean, with the NPO maintains the TIP in order to make sure that the projects that are being programmed in our region are in line with our community's expectations. Our community's expectations being expressed via this board. And so when there are times where there are decisions being made that this board doesn't agree with, we don't have to include those in the TIP, at which point there is a lot that will go on there. So really, I mean, they are supposed to be documents that have the same information available, but it is there in case there are disagreements. Does that make sense, Jim?
It does, because we already passed our STIP in our previous March meeting. It's just that when they're separate, it misses the part where they fit together as part of a bigger puzzle. And so my concern is, what are some of the other core infrastructure projects that would help us get to our stated safety goals, which is like sort of, we can adopt safety goals, but are we going to do it regularly? This is part of that work of the doing it part. But when they fit together as part of the bigger puzzle with the STIP and the TIP, I still have the same concerns about how we prioritize larger infrastructure expansion for interstates over prioritizing our core. That said, I'm prepared to support the TIP today because I think that these are the kinds of projects we should be doing more, and we could be doing more if we prioritize our core infrastructure.
Right. I think something to point out with this round of TIP amendments is that this is actually the end of a fairly lengthy process that's been going on kind of with the prioritization subcommittee, as well as our member governments over the last 8 months, 9 months. So what you see before you both incorporate some new projects, some new locally administered projects. That includes the addition of the Wrightsville Road sidewalks, which were submitted by Division 13 as a request of some of the members of the prioritization subcommittee. Thank you, Division 13. Also, the Texas Road Bridge replacement with Montreat. I don't want to give Division 13 too big of a head, but thank you, Division 13, for taking on administration for that project. That's very helpful. So it's adding additional locally administered projects, making them officially funded in the TIP and to be reflected later in the STIP. But it also adds additional funding to a number of our projects. we coordinated with all of the locally administered projects on the books and asked our local government, how much more money do you think you need to complete these projects? What's a realistic schedule? And so we added funding where it was requested, to the extent that we can. The MPO does not print money. We do get quite a bit of federal funding. So with these TIP amendments, we will have more than $70 million programmed in locally administered projects around the region. I believe it's 70.6 million overall, with 70.2 going towards primarily bicycle and pedestrian projects. Just to point out, these TIP amendments, they don't look like much, but a lot of work has gone into them over the last few months.
Exactly. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I have a question. So the Acoustic Trail Phase 2, that's $10 million. How long has that been in the system I mean, because I'm new. So how long has that been on the wish list?
So this is actually the first time it'll be reflected on the CIP. So that is a project that we agreed to fund last fall, and we are now putting it into the TIP. So this is for that specific phase. That'll be the first time. The first part of the Augusta, going from Cayuga Road to US 64 and Horseshoe, that has been on the TIP for, I believe it's 3 years. Don't quote me on dates. I still have some baby brain. But I believe it's about somewhere in the 2 to 4 year range is when we initially put it on the TIP to make it funded.
Because it just seems like there's a lot of the smaller towns that have been waiting for years and years to have their engineering done. And their dates have been pushed out 3 and 4 years they've already been waiting. And now their dates have been pushed out farther. And now $10 million is going to Phase 2 of Augusta.
That's a really great question. And that's something we have been in discussions with some folks at Weaverville specifically about. I think one of the projects you're referring to is Green Street Greenway. That is a project that has been on the CIP for more than 2 to 4 years. The reason why we recommended that project be moved out is that with the federal funds, after engineering funds are spent, there's an expectation to show significant progress towards completing the project every 3 years and completion within 10. Our concern about starting the preliminary engineering at this point is that there are no other funds committed to that project outside of engineering. And so in coordination with the project managers, we felt that at this point, it would be better to move the engineering further back and figure out how we're going to get right-of-way and construction funding before we start that clock with the federal funding. We don't want to put our local governments in a situation in which they're potentially liable to refund the federal government for all the federal funds spent on engineering. So, does that make sense?
It'll help me to pass it along. Thank you.
Well, it might be helpful too to explain the additional funds raised for Augusta by Henderson County to show that we were serious about the project and we had funds to be able to kind of see the project through. So a lot of that was state grant money. The TDA has allocated funds specifically to help fund Augusta, and so that is like one of the things I think that has been really helpful with the community as far as Henderson County for Augusta is kind of having that bank's money to be able to say that we're ready to move forward so that we don't get to the stall point.
I think I'd like to talk further to you about that and how that got started for funding, because there's a lot of people on the Ridge Creek Valley that would be interested in starting the funding project.
Yes.
Particularly Nancy Waldrop that's on the Buncombe County.
There's a really awesome group called Friends of Augusta too in Henderson County, and Chris Burns is I can give you that contact, but I mean, this group of people started 15 years ago, I think, raising money and applying for grants, and but Chris would be like a vast wealth of knowledge for you.
Yeah, and just to point out, the Acoustic Trail project is moving so quickly. They've acquired right-of-way through other federal grants, so the rail has already been acquired. Honestly, the work being done by Henderson County staff has moved that project along very, very quickly. So my hats off to Henderson County on how quickly they've been able to progress that project.
That helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Chuck McGrady. I
I'll
chaired the Acoustic Trail Advisory Committee and was a legislator to try to get the money to acquire the trail. This thing is fast track, but it's fast track because there are monies coming from a lot of different places, including private dollars, to support the effort. And again, Henderson County staff, but also Laurel Park and Hendersonville on the Henderson County side of the trail have really worked together and coordinated. We just need to do a better job of getting the money out the door. Now I'm putting on my DOT board hat. It's just very frustrating for me knowing the needs and the desires, that keep getting expressed about similar walking ways or alternative ways of moving about, that we just don't seem to be very good at moving the projects along. And so, I'm not embarrassed by the fact that Acoustic has moved forward. I hope it provides a bit of a model in the future for how to get these things, not just on paper, but moving ahead pretty quickly. I think the local match is coming from the governments here have also been, significant. And the legislature actually has put a lot of money into this project too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chuck. Because I know I'll be asked about it probably right after this meeting, could you go over the Russ Avenue project?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I'm not gonna know the ins and outs of what's happening with the project offhand, the design of it and stuff. All I'm really gonna have access to is the funding, which is what you guys see in your agenda packet as well. We can circle back to it.
Anthony, what do you want to know specifically?
Yeah, we had pushed off the South Main, then Russ Avenue had gotten changed with the other project going on in Haywood County, and the town of Waynesville just allocated all the funds to move all the electrical on Russ Avenue. So we took a big hit in this coming budget, and if we could have pushed that farther out, it might have been helpful. But it seems like it's now going to be it was supposed to start construction in 2023, but now some of this looks like it's even out to 2029.
So it's still going to let in 2023. The let date is July of 2023, and that's when construction will start. But funding gets spread out through the whole life cycle of the project. It's just a budgeting issue. So you don't see all the funding for 2023. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And I just wanted clarification because I knew I would be asked at the end of this meeting. So thank you.
Yeah. So right now the let date is July of 2023. There is a chance that will slip a couple of months because of some utility and also some environmental issues, but it's too early to say.
I think as long as there's some construction going on, we'll be good.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I think one other thing to note is we did segment the Woodfin Greenway into sections A and B just for project logistics. So section A is now the section from Broadway to Elk Mountain Road along 251 in the river. And section B is along Beaver Dam Creek, and that is noted in your agenda packet.
Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion if there is one.
So moved, Jen Hensley.
Thank you, Jen. Do I have a second?
Second, Chuck McGrady.
Thank you, Chuck. Time for roll call.
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Asheville, Maggie Ullman.
Aye.
BOC Division 14, Chuck McGrady.
I think that's an aye.
Buncombe County, Parker Sloan.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Amanda Edwards.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Bob Davies.
Aye.
Haywood County, Kevin Ensley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lashley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley. Aye. Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Gaunt.
Aye.
Rural Transit, David White.
Aye.
Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
And Weaverville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. The ayes have it.
Fantastic. Moving on to the last business item, the congestion management process, biannual report.
All right, and I do have a number of charts and maps for this one, fair warning. CMP biennial update. First of all, what is a CMP? That's our congestion management process. That is something that's required for larger MPOs or TMAs, of which our MPO is one. So from federal highways, the congestion management process is a systematic and regionally accepted approach for managing congestion that provides accurate, up-to-date information on transportation system performance and assesses alternative strategies for congestion management in state and local needs. To point out, we last adopted kind of our primary CMP in 2018, that is a document that identified our kind of congested routes and identified them based on 3 different categories. One of the categories is what we call our freight routes. Those are the routes with significant freight movement on those corridors. The general recommendation is for less tolerance for congestion along those, and that's primarily our interstate routes. Secondly are the mobility routes. Those are the surface streets located in what we call less walkable contacts. Generally serve more long-range trips and have a number of recommendations on how to address congestion through those, especially focusing on access management, longer range transit service, and other TDM strategies. And finally are the destination corridors. Those are surface streets located in more walkable contexts. They serve a significant amount of shorter range trips, and that's where we identify that there should be more tolerance for congestion, and generally starting to look at more kind of mode strategies for addressing congestion through there. I would say primarily think of main streets in a lot of our towns and similar corridors. So this biennial report serves to provide updated information. As noted earlier, the CMP is required to provide congestion information on the region. A lot of the data that we pulled for this focuses on 2021. And so looking at a lot of kind of what we're calling the somewhat sustaining impacts from the pandemic, I think we're still seeing shifts from that. And just really quick on the sources of data that we pulled, the first is travel time reliability. A lot of that is cell phone data or data taken from other similar sources. And it's basically looking at how long it's taken travelers to get from one point to another on our congestion maps. To note, it covers most but not all of what we identified as the CMP. We also pulled data from the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey. So a lot of that is looking at what people provided to the U.S. Census Bureau about how they primarily commute to work. There's a lot to unpack with that. And also the longitudinal employer household dynamics, or LEHD data, that provides data on where workers live versus where their employers are located. There's a lot of caveats to that. The thing I point out is telecommuting tends to skew that. If you pull some of the reports directly, it shows that there's 100-ish people in our area who commute, I'm making quotes, to San Francisco. They probably don't make that trip too often, but that is where their employer is located, and they are someone located in our region. Just to note there. So to get into it, some of the big takeaways is that travel delay, or the total hours that people spend in traffic in our region is down significantly from 2019, and that remained the case in 2022. We pulled some of the data on the causes of congestion in the 5-county region. So again, this is looking at the total number of hours based on this tool of number of hours they spent in traffic and what was the assigned cause of that traffic event. One thing to point out is that the recurrent congestion, that's kind of your standard traffic jam and rush hours, delays from that cause is down very, very significantly. However, for I-26 commuters, this probably sounds right. Incidents in work zone was one of the few categories that increased, as well as general delays from work zone areas. But all in all, this is, I also looked at some of the data statewide, and this isn't totally unique to our region. I think the interesting thing with that is looking at overall vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. This is data provided from NCDOT. As Daniel Sellers has pointed out in the previous meeting, 2023 hasn't happened yet. That's just projected data. But what's kind of important to focus on is the 2021 data, and that it shows it mostly back to within kind of that pre-pandemic average. And so kind of you put two and two together, people are traveling as much as they did, or driving as much as they did before the pandemic, but delay is down significantly. We don't have the connection there, but the hypothesis is that people are most likely redistributing a lot of their trips. They're making fewer trips, especially in our afternoon rush hour, and instead making more trips at different times of the day when there's less likely to be traffic. We also pulled this travel time data on more specific segments throughout the region. So what you see mapped is a metric called the travel time index. That's something that basically measures the reliability of the routes. But one of the takeaways looking at this data is we pulled AM rush hour figures and PM, and this has been the same since as long as we've been pulling this data. The AM traffic is still considerably less than our PM traffic throughout our region. That is just something to note. So this is one metric looking at AM And when you go to PM, you can see significantly more red. More red is bad. So things are a lot less reliable between the AM and the PM. But also, again, to note that overall the reliability is increased. So kind of our threshold for unreliable roads for this one is down from 10.8% of our roadway miles in 2019 to 5.1% in 2021. That's in the PM. And you see that with other metrics as well. This is the planning time index, which think of this as more of kind of how reliable is it kind of 1 in 20 times. The way Federal Highways puts it is, this is the metric that gets at the traffic that people tend to remember, even if it's not all that common. But the measures that we're seeing is our roadway network is significantly more reliable, or was in 2021, compared to 2019. 3 areas that we kind of flagged as needing to examine further. I-40 West, that is one of our least reliable freight corridors without a funded project on it. So that's kind of the section between I-26 going up towards Haywood County. Four Seasons Boulevard, that is one of our mobility corridors. It was seen as a top 10 bottleneck. That's reflected in your report. So one of the least reliable mobility corridors in the region. Also Hendersonville Road, just south of I-40, so kind of near the Shiloh neighborhood. We flagged that with 1 serious and fatal bike head crash, as well as 8 total crashes in the last 5 years. And it's one of the least reliable destination corridors. So that's one of those areas where we see kind of overlapping interests. Both we need to improve safety, as well as address some of the reliability issues. To get into the commute to work and some of the factors that play into how people get around and get to work in our region, a trend that's not surprising is telecommuting is up, and up by a lot. So just to point out, this is 5-year estimate data, so it's most likely a little muted compared to what's actually happening on the ground. But all in all, the trend is a lot more people are telecommuting or working from home pretty much year after year. Looking at it county by county, we're seeing that every single one of our counties, the number of people working from home has more than doubled, with the exception of Haywood County, which didn't quite double but still grew. But Buncombe, Henderson, Madison, Transylvania is up significantly. Carpooling is generally trending down, not by a ton, but we're still seeing that general figure moving downwards, and that is pretty steady across the region. Walking to work, a quick caveat on this is that, again, with this data, this is survey data that people have been asked, what's your primary way of getting to work? This doesn't get at overall walking demand. If I walk around the park, if I walk my dog, etc., that's not reflected. This is walking to work. But generally, we're seeing that those numbers are pretty flat around the region. Public transit, or taking public transit to work, roughly flat. And biking to work going somewhat down, which is not necessarily the trend that we would prefer to see, especially given the recommendations of the CMP. Again, not reflective of overall demand, but it's something that I think says a lot about the commuting environment. And to put all these modes in context of driving alone, the percentage of people driving alone in our region went down slightly, but that is still significantly higher than any other way of getting to work. That's reported in this survey. Getting into the kind of the LEHC data of where people live and work. One of the big trends that we've reported to this board several times over the last few years is that living and working in the same county is down. We've noticed it somewhat stabilizing over the last few years, but that is a big trend. I think the way we put it previously is our region is continuing to regionalize. We're seeing a lot more of kind of that cross-county dependency. I won't go through all of these, but just kind of visualizing some of the big cross-county commuting patterns or working and living patterns. Henderson to Buncombe is still our biggest cross-county commuting pattern, more than 12,000 people per day. And to note, the connections over to Mecklenburg and to a lesser extent Wake County, we've seen those grow pretty significantly. I do get asked this a lot, so I did make a note. Connections to South Carolina and Tennessee are still relatively small. So what's mapped here are the top 15 commuting patterns or live-work patterns in our region. I have to get into the 30s and 40s to pull in Tennessee and South Carolina. And just to note, we can pull this data to get into smaller geographies. So what's mapped here is where Henderson County workers are going to work. So a lot of it is just across the county line into Buncombe, but we are seeing some of that into downtown Asheville and also into Brevard. But just to quickly put that in a list of where we're seeing these cross-county patterns, the six most significant, Henderson to Buncombe, again, more than 12,000, but I think one of the big things there with those numbers is an increase of more than 7,000 since 2002. That is a huge increase. Buncombe to Henderson is at 7,000, but mostly flat since 2002. Haywood to Buncombe just below 6,000, but did see a significant increase. Buncombe to Mecklenburg at about 4,600, again, a significant increase. Madison to Buncombe, more than 3,300, increasing steadily, and McDowell to Buncombe, getting higher and higher on this list. And so we're seeing that more than 3,000, but more than doubling since 2002. I think another thing we saw in this data is looking at it from another way. So looking at it from the kind of employer's perspective, is that with this chart, what it's saying is Buncombe County essentially had a net job growth of about 32,000 new jobs since 2002. And of that new jobs, there's a whole lot of that is being filled with workers coming from outside of Buncombe County. I forget the exact numbers, but more than 70% based on this data set. That's not a unique trend. Henderson County is very similar, Haywood County as well. But to me, again, that is reflecting the fact of our economy getting more and more regional. And I think that's something we're hearing from other people as well. If you're trying to recruit workers, it's getting harder and harder to pull them from down the street. Their employer recruitment is becoming a more regional requirement. And finally, some equity considerations. With this data set, we're able to look at the change in origin of workers based on their pay. So for this, we pulled in workers earning less than $3,333 per month. I did not type in that number. That's been asked. That is just there's three choices to go from. But this is something that there's some similarities in other places, but this is the most significant. So Asheville workers earning $333.3 or less per month, we're seeing a whole lot more of them coming from outside of Buncombe County, and fewer of them coming from Asheville or even Buncombe County outside of Asheville. So that, to me, this chart speaks volumes about some of the transportation challenges we have as a region of getting people to work, and some of the cross-county considerations that we have. Right now we don't have cross-county transit service. There are some transit options that require transfers at one or multiple points. That is something this board has looked at before. But to me, that is something that should spur further conversation. Lower income workers, especially in Asheville, are coming from further and further away. So that's just a summary of the report. You do have the report in your packet. We are looking for acceptance of the report today as part of our biennial data. But are there any questions or comments at this point?
I'll make a comment. We just did Weaverville just had a transportation traffic biped study completed in the last, well, we just got it back this week. We worked on it with a company for more than a year. And one of the figures that I just read last night was that the average cost to own and operate a car for an individual in this area is a little over $9,000 a year. I don't know if that's common knowledge, but it was new to me.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that this chart says to me is that a lot of people seem to be shifting. They're moving from where housing costs more, but the trade-off is that the transportation burden that they're taking on.
That's exactly right.
It's significant.
Because, we've been working also on this. Buncombe County wanted to have affordable housing somewhere in the Weaverville area. And what I struggle with that is that because we don't have any kind of a good public transportation system at all from Weaverville to Asheville to bring people to work, that you already can't afford to be somewhere, now you have to have a car to get somewhere.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing is some people are making that choice.
Right.
This is Kim. I just, I agree. When we aren't looking at location affordability, we're missing that opportunity to acknowledge that when you have to have a car to move further away, that's an additional cost. So is the time you spend away from your family, because then childcare costs go up, access to resource, education, economic mobility. I am grateful that the city and the county are looking at studying shoring up our core services and how we can better collaborate together. We have both discussed funding for a joint study together in this budget cycle, and I'm hopeful that laying that foundational work at improving our core services will make it so that as we connect to regional transit, it's reliable for the folks that connect with it once they get to Asheville and Buncombe County too. I think there's a positive first step while we acknowledge there's a long way to go.
Agreed. Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I have
That's
to
our
say this
last
here just because I know I'm repeating it over and over again, but if we had equity and sustainability in our staff reports, not just the fiscal impact up front, then we would be looking longer term at what's the cost of doing things cheap or fast, especially because the investments that we oversee here at this table are investments for a generation or beyond in all of our communities. In Western North Carolina, We have a lot of neighbors who care and want us to do better. And I can't not see that connection between our safety outcomes and our safety goals, and then do we actually do it? Which is why I'm still really concerned that when we delay safety improvements on our corridors like Sweeten Creek or New Leicester Highway, then by prioritizing people moving faster on the big corridors, we don't improve the ability for people to move safer on our interior roads, means that people will not choose to do things like bike. So when we see those numbers going down, I'm unsurprised. And also, I think there's a lot of opportunity to do better.
Thank you, Ken. Any other questions, concerns? I'll entertain a motion to accept the CMP biannual report.
So moved, Bob Davy.
Thank you, Bob.
Second,
Do I
Amanda
have a
Edwards.
second?
Second, Amanda Edwards.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Amanda. Time for a roll call.
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Asheville, Maggie Ullman.
Aye.
DOT Division 14, Chuck McGrady.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Parker Sloan. Buncombe County, Amanda Edwards.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Bob Davy.
Aye.
Haywood County, Kevin Ensley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lapsley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Rebecca McCall.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley. Aye. Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Gaunt.
Aye.
Rural Transit, David White.
Aye.
Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
And Weaverville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. The ayes have it.
Thank you. That finishes up our business, which in case anyone needs to jump off. Next, we'll move on to the informational items, the draft 2024 to 2023 Transportational Improvement Program, or TIP.
Yeah, this is just quick information for everyone following up on our March meeting. So the final revised draft 2024 through 2033 TIP is up on the MPO website. That is not to be confused with the revised draft 2024 through 2033 TIP. Believe it or not, they're different. So a few of the differences you may notice is what's come out looking at the swaps that were approved by the MPO as well as MCDOT, as well as the segmentation of Sweeten Creek and additional delays, as my understanding goes, due to some of the updated cost estimates. The proposed new interchange at Liberty Road on I-40 to the west of the Patton Avenue or exit 44. The construction schedule has been moved back 1 year from 25 to 26. The Sardis Sandhill Road project was moved back from 2028 to 2031. Sweeten Creek Road is now reflected in the draft TIP as U2801AA. That is the section from Hendersonville Road to Mills Gap Road that this board recommended segmenting and putting back through prioritization. So that is shown as not committed right now. The other section, U2801AB, that's from Mills Gap Road north to Rock Hill Road. That split is now shown and that project is reflected as committed. Also, the US 64 and I-26 interchange, that is shown as becoming committed in the draft TIP with a construction date of 2029. And Canoga Road has moved from 2029 to now uncommitted. So moving forward, the Board of Transportation plans to approve the draft STIP at its June meeting. the MPO will plan to consider adoption at our August meeting, meaning this will become our new tip moving forward after that. So this is just an informational item, but any questions on this one?
Don't hear anything, Tristan.
Okay.
Moving on to regional trail.
So we are moving forward with the Regional Trail Forum. The last meeting was on March 15th, and we will schedule the next meeting. The Zoom should go out right after this meeting. If you would like the event, if you would like the invitation and you don't get it, please email me. We're holding the event. We booked Smoky Park Supper Club for an August 31st event. Our theme is Networking Greenways, and it will be a half-day event with an optional Greenway walk after closing/lunch. There will be an elected official coffee hour in the morning before the event starts, and the topics will potentially include equity, health and wellness, which is the August Year of the Trail theme, the economic impacts of greenways, and networking best practices. Brett Baranak from the Carolina Thread Trail is the official keynote speaker, and we are really excited to have him come up and speak about the Carolina Thread Trail and greenways. That next bullet point, the next meeting will be, I think the date was June 5th in the afternoon. And we plan on having sessions geared towards staff and interested citizens, so mark your calendars.
Thank you. That should be good. Next, we'll move on to updates, Division 13.
Yeah, I have my standard project development and construction updates. So I think Tristan covered pretty thoroughly in his informational item about the steps, the changes between the August draft that we received in August 2022 and the latest. Everything else on the list didn't see a change between August of last year and now. And so a lot of those dates should be familiar at this point, but there is a comprehensive list of all the Buncombe and Madison STIP projects. Just keep in mind, I say this every time, but anything that says in the right-of-way utilities or construction schedule that it's either not funded or funded for preliminary engineering only, those are the projects that will automatically have to recompete in prioritization 7.0 starting in July. The other ones that have a right-of-way schedule, either fiscal year 2028 or sooner, those projects are what we would formally call committed, meaning they don't have to recompete for funding. So again, Tristan went over the changes. The rest of them are there in the handout. As far as construction, he's showing on the screen what we call our active construction progress report. So this is a list of all of the active construction projects in Buncombe and Madison County. And you can see the completion date and the completion percentage. There's a lot of resurfacing and bridge replacements across the two counties. I do kind of like to touch on a handful that are very visible. So wanted to touch on the Overlook Road, Hendersonville Road intersection project. Work has resumed out there. If you drive in that area, in the evening, you'll be in a lane closure. So the contractor, me every night this week. So the contractor has installed the curb and gutter and started placing the final pavement at the intersection. Work will continue for the next month, constructing the new sidewalk out there and paving the remainder of the project and finally installing the new traffic signals. They are still on schedule to have that completed by the end of June, so hang in there 6 weeks or so. Wanted to touch on Merriman Avenue. The contractor continues to replace the curb ramps. There's a lot of curb ramp replacements on the Merriman Avenue project. But they have resumed the paving operations. It's another one. If you drive out there, you know this already. They have completed paving all the way from Beaver Lake to I-240. They are scheduled to complete paving the remaining section from I-240 to Biltmore Ave by the end of June. I think there might be like a press something tomorrow. I know there's someone scheduled to be on the news about that tomorrow, so stay tuned for that from something from our construction crowd. The permanent pavement markings have been placed on the road diet section except for a few more bike symbols, and they will start placing the permanent pavement markings on the newly paved section just in the coming weeks as they finish the paving. So happy to see that one wrapping up. I do obviously always like to touch on I-26 widening. This would be Buncombe, so Airport Road to I-40. The contractor is continuing grading operations and placing the concrete pavement for the new westbound alignment between the French Broad River Bridge up towards Brevard Road. They have started on the final section of the French Broad River Bridge, so they hopefully will have that completed by the end of this calendar year. So the French Broad River Bridge, hopefully by the end of the calendar year, will be complete. They've been doing that in phases. There's been a lot of construction on sound walls. Again, if you're traveling it, you're seeing those noise walls being constructed for several months now. They've actually about completed that. So we've got a lot less noise walls in Buncombe than we're going up in Henderson, I think. But that's it for me, unless there's any questions.
Hannah, there might have been a confirmation of this a while ago, but with B 4442, I know that goes over where the Greens Creek Greenway is planned. Was that, do you know if that was accommodated into the design?
I don't know, but I can check.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay. Any other questions for Division 13? Division 14.
All right, before we start on updates, just a few personnel changes. Y'all might be aware that Troy Wilson, who was our corridor development engineer, has accepted the District 1 engineer position, and that's Polk, Transylvania, and Henderson County. So congratulations to Troy on that. Also, our division engineer, Wanda Austin, I guess it's been almost a month now, got married. So she's actually on this call. I noticed that that's a Wanda Payne up there. I'm sure she's getting tired of the Payne jokes, but so be it. So congratulations to Wanda on her marriage. And to answer, Catherine, your bridge question, it has to be a rating of 40 or below. And to be clear, that doesn't mean the bridge is about to fall down. It just has to be posted at a lower load rating. And if you remember from the performance targets, I think it was like 5.3% or something. In poor rating. So, all right. So on to project development update. What Hannah said applies for all this. As far as projects that'll have to go through P7 for prioritization. Next time we meet, hopefully the revised draft STIP will be adopted, and we'll be able to clean this up just a little bit. In Haywood County, Anthony, as we said, the Russ Avenue project did move from May of this year to July of this year. That's really the only let date change on this list right now. Yeah. Any questions on the project development side of things? All right. Construction updates. Next page. Yeah. So. If you're traveling on I-40, just be aware that resurfacing projects are cranking back up since it is the season. So in addition to those bridge projects that are being replaced near Jonathan Creek, where 276 comes out on I-40, you'll also have resurfacing from 27 to about mile marker 35. Walnut Main Street's progressing really well. I think the drainage structures are almost complete there, and otherwise it's ridges being completed in Haywood County. The second from the bottom there, remember that was a high impact, low cost funded project, those intersections at Sonoma Road. That's way further along than 63%. It's for the most part complete. And also the sidewalk project there going up to Moody Farm Road. If you remember, we had to pair that with another sidewalk project in Jackson County. So the percentage there might not be exactly right because it's reported for both the projects together. I'm not sure exactly how far along that is. The I-26 project, nothing nearly as exciting as what's going on in Division 13 with the Blue Ridge Parkway Bridge, but right now the concrete pavement on the westbound lanes and the rest area is being worked on, and that westbound rest area is closed, or at least it was a week and a half ago. Henderson County, again, on I-26, if you're traveling towards Polk County, the Green River Bridge is under construction. Both lanes are still open in each direction, but the shoulders are closed. Once they finish the center section, the traffic will shift. So just beware of those traffic shifts in the upcoming month. And Highland Lake Road has actually started. I know Ann's on the call and is hopefully happy to see that has started. So. And otherwise, that's it for Division 14. Any questions?
I just had one question, Ann Coletta. I just wanted to double check because we're getting a lot of questions. There are a lot of concrete pipes out there, and I'm assuming that's for storm drainage once you all get to that. Is that what those big pipes are for?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Just so we let our front desk know because they're getting some phone calls. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next, Daniel Sellers for Transportation Planning Branch.
Good morning. No handout today because last month our big news was that the planning organizations had their annual conference last month in Greenville, and it was well attended. It was the highest turnout they've had in the 20-some years they've been running the conference. And there were many good presentations, and I just want to highlight one of them was the road diet presentation by Eric Lamb, the former planner at City of Raleigh. And this is for a former 5-lane road that went right through NC State campus. And this, I think, is one of the earlier road diets in the state because I think he was presenting 10-year follow-up information that they've been able to gather. And I just found it a very good presentation. I'll let Tristan share the bombshell news concerning the rest of that conversation. My only other point of update today is this week we did have the freight bulletin come out. And of course, you can receive the freight bulletin directly from our freight office if you want to sign up for it. And in it, there have been some rearrangements and they've switched to a 6-month rolling freight bottleneck report. And of the top 10 bottlenecks in the last quarter in the state, there are now 3 in our region, 1 in Raleigh, and the other, that must be 6, are in Charlotte. So by this one measure of congestion, you can say you're worse than the capital. But I want to read this just one sentence because what has happened is you've now claimed the #1 spot. There is no trophy. I got asked that earlier today. March's freight network bottleneck top 10 analysis based on a 6-month rolling average continues to be dominated by urban congestion zones. However, the previous period's only rural bottleneck, I-40 west at US 276 near Clyde, has taken over the top spot with a 42% increase in congestion and has welcomed its eastbound neighbor into the top 10 from its previous position just outside the rankings. 3 of the other top 10s have seen an average of 9% decline in total delay over the time period. So there you have it. I know that construction is going to wrap up as soon as we can, but for now it's the top. And just for those who are curious, the third one out of the area is where do I have it? I-40 at, no, excuse me, I-26 at NC 146. So exit 37. So those are my updates for now, and we'll have more next month.
Thank you, Daniel. I can attest to both of those because I travel them both each day, every day. So I have seen it get it worse. Next is the FWDA FTA updates.
We do have Bill Marley on the line. Bill, if you want to provide an update. Sorry for the echo.
You don't have to unmute yourself. You're unmuting.
Kristen, this is Bill. Did you call on me?
Yes, it's for any FTA and FHWA updates.
Okay, sorry, I got distracted there for a moment. I don't have anything really this month. Good information about the federal discussion earlier in the meeting. That was spot on. Just update on, grants. Most everything was, brought up to speed with the MPO conference. So we don't have anything much more to report on this month, maybe next month.
Perfect. Thank you. Tristan, subcommittee work group reports, staff update.
I won't go through all of them that are in your packet. We have been making those reports a little more detailed, but just to say a lot of our subcommittees and work groups are continuing to be active and have a lot of items that will be coming through the TCC and board later if they didn't already come through today.
Okay. Legislative updates?
Yes, there are quite a few, but to note, a lot of these, I think are just points of interest that have been filed at this point. So a few that I've filtered out that may be of interest to folks. House Bill 787, that's an act to codify the existing limits of DOT right-of-way and easements. House Bill 811, that is a bill aiming at abolishing contributory negligence. That's something that I think has been pretty big, especially in the bicycle advocate realm. House Bill 656, that allows transit authorities to operate 10 miles outside of its jurisdiction. House Bill 643, that aims at establishing a passenger rail service fund. So as you'll remember, we did get an update on the study to connect Asheville to Salisbury via passenger rail, if that is of interest. House Bill 609, that allows electronic speed monitoring in school zones. House Bill 582, Transportation for the Future Act. That is a bill that, my notes, from what I've heard, is unlikely to move, but it does suggest a number of revisions to the Strategic Transportation Investments Law. House Bill 663 also notes unlikely to move, but does replace the gas tax with a flat tax based on weight and fuel efficiency. I think that's kind of a hybrid of some recommendations that came out of the DOT study a few years ago. House Bill 717, that is a bill aimed at studying MPOs. From what I was told, the original draft of this was to require MPOs to send first-class mail to potentially impacted homeowners along projects in the tip and stick. From what our colleagues in Raleigh told us is that would have costed us several $100,000 in first-class mail in order to adopt our tip in August. So studying MPOs sounds a whole lot better to me. Senate Bill 549, that amends rules for development moratorium related to transportation projects. House Bill 760, that requires signage at construction sites that shows project cost and estimated completion date. So those are the ones that kind of stuck out, but there are many, many more that have been filed. That's what we have for you all today. A few other updates, more than a few. The event that was held last week, 2 weeks ago? I think last week. Everything you wanted to know about the spot, but were afraid to ask. That is up on the MPO website. I'm being told that was 2 weeks ago. Time flies. So if you're interested in learning more about prioritization, we did have members of the NCDOT spot office present on kind of a little more than an overview of the prioritization process, but not going too deep into the weeds. Thanks for everyone who joined for that event. And a few other things to note, staff helps with developed applications for the Woodson and Mars Hill Bike Ped Planning Grant. And by that, I mainly mean thank you, Hannah, for helping those towns submit for those planning grants. The SPOT work group, or the prioritization work group, that wrapped up its work for the upcoming round of prioritization. So that work group made several recommendations on changes to the prioritization process. So that'll be moving forward to the Board of Transportation, I believe next month. Vicki Eastland and I will be driving to Raleigh quite a bit less, thankfully. Also, as Daniel noted, the NCAMPO, or the Association of MPOs, they held their conference last month in Greenville. Daniel, I hate to correct you, I don't believe it had the highest attendance. I think that went to Charlotte, which got almost 1,000 people to join, but it was a great conference. I think the news I'm supposed to break is that we agreed to host the MPO conference in 2026. I think if it were up to my other MPOs, we would just switch between us and Wilmington over and over, but we agreed to 2026. So that'll be coming up. Also, there's a couple of paved trail studies that have kicked off in our region. That includes one in Asheville, one in Hendersonville. A number of our special studies are getting under contract or have gone through that process. Just as a reminder, that includes the socioeconomic forecast, Patton Avenue, Reed Creek, and Fonta Flora. And finally, I want to give a thank you to Daniel Sellers. Something we brought up several months ago was the fact that our travel demand model doesn't reflect short-term rentals. There are more than 9,800 of those in our region, and Daniel has been helping coordinate conversations on trying to get that data to incorporate into our model. So thank you on that, Daniel. That is the exhaustive updates I have for you today.
Perfect. And that includes topics for the next meeting?
I think topics for the next meeting, well, one of the big things will be an update on the next round of prioritization. We've been talking with NCDOT. They recently did a vulnerable road user assessment that includes looking at our MPO. So that's something we've asked if they'd be able to attend next meeting.
Perfect. And at the conference I was at today, they announced that the NCDOT conference for 2024 will be in May in Greensboro. So that's just another item. Moving ahead, do we have any additional public comment? I'll take that as a no additional public comment. Does anyone else have anything? Hearing none, I will adjourn. Thank you, everybody.